Amazing millionaire returns from Dubai to discover mother and maid in unexpected danger. Revealed. Jake Thompson stepped off the plane, the air thick with the scent of nostalgia, as he inhaled the familiar rural embrace of his hometown in Ohio. Wealth draped around him like a tailored suit, a penthouse view in Dubai, a fleet of luxurious cars. But now that glitzy profile felt constricted, like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. As he drove past the dusty roads, his heart sank. His mother's urgent messages weighed heavily in his mind. What kind of trouble could they be in? A gnawing emptiness clawed at him, the laughter of his childhood hauntingly absent from the deep shadows that lurked in the corners of his prosperity. Pulling into the driveway, he was engulfed by the unmistakable aroma of freshly baked pies wafting through the air, a tantalizing warmth juxtaposed against the frostiness he felt deep within. His mother stood over the stove, surrounded by their loyal maid Maria, both women engrossed in a heated argument about a piece of land Jake had never known existed. His heart raced at the tension. He felt like an outsider peering in at a family unraveling. "What's going on?" Jake questioned, unease fusing with a sense of impending doom. Maria's voice trembled, stammering with blame. "Your mother wasn't answering her messages," she protested. The shadows of accusation loomed. Jake clenched his jaw, grappling with the ingrained loyalty he felt towards both women. Maria had always been the heart of their home. To see her belittled unsettled him, but his mother's spirit shone like a beacon. "I won't let some greedy developer push me around," she declared, her eyes aflame with determination. This was the woman who raised him, selfless, steadfast. Even now she stood tall against the looming threat. Pressure climbed in Jake's chest. The path he walked in Dubai, paved with success and luxury, seemed to twist into a murky quagmire of guilt and conflict. The very wealth that freed him became the chains that bound him. The local mogul's veiled threats seeped into his thoughts. The very concept of wealth that once beckoned him now bore a different weight. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The evening air felt electric as Jake stood in the doorway again, tension suffocating him as he replayed the mogul's threats in his mind. He felt trapped between two worlds, the glittering facade of Dubai's startups and the raw, honest fight for what his family had built. Memories of his mother caring for those in need flashed through his mind. The selflessness he admired suddenly mingled with the regret of choosing profit over principles. The stakes hit closer to home when a message lit up his phone. Another warning directed towards his family sent adrenaline surging through him. What about his empire built on ambition? Could he genuinely risk everything for this? An internal battle raged. Would he turn his back on the small-town values that birthed him, forgetting their warmth as he chased an elusive comfort in wealth? The pressure built, intensifying with every tick of the clock. He would confront the mogul, he vowed. But as dread settled in his bones, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the weight of his decision would be heavier than he ever anticipated. With a steely resolve, Jake stepped into the dimly lit kitchen, where the tension was palpable. His mother's defiance was a fire, a flicker of strength amidst the uncertainties swirling around them. "Mom, this isn't just about land," he said, his voice low but firm. "They won't stop until they get what they want. We have to be strategic." The very familiarity of the space now felt as alien as the skyscrapers of Dubai, laden with the urgency of the moment. His mother paused, her expression a mix of pride and skepticism. "You think because you've made it somewhere else you can come back and solve this for me?" "This is our home, Jake." Her tone was both accusatory and challenging, and he felt the weight of her expectations pressing against him, a reminder of the man he used to be. "I don't see it that way," Jake pushed back, setting his jaw. "I've gained something valuable, experience, a sense of what's possible when you stand your ground. But this isn't just me, this is us. He watched Maria in the corner, dismantled by the exchange, her eyes darting between mother and son. The lines of loyalty were fraying, and with every passing second, Jake felt time slip from him like grains of sand. Maria, you've been here through so much. Together we can fight this. You know how these developers work. Your insights could be crucial. A flicker of hope ignited in Maria's downcast eyes. I've seen them operate, she whispered, weighing her words. They just want to suffocate anyone who stands in their way. As Jake crossed his arms, a rush of realization poured over him. He had built his life on aggressive strategies, navigating the competitive arena of startups. But here, in the heart of what had shaped him, he needed a more nuanced approach. Then let's gather everything we know. We need to understand their game better than they do. Flashes of strategy formed in his mind, and he moved toward the antiquated desk tucked in the corner of the kitchen, littered with papers and memories. We can document everything. Find their faults, their weaknesses. They won't expect a fight from us. Questions erupted like fireworks. Could his skills thrive here? Could he channel the ambition he honed far away to protect his roots? He hadn't just left Ohio. He had buried parts of himself beneath the surface glamour of wealth. Was he ready to unearth those layers? The tension in the room began to shift. Determination mingled with fear as fears transformed into plans. Plans that demanded attention and rallied spirits. But, Mom, he added cautiously, I can't do this alone. I need you both to trust me, even if my methods feel different. Your father would have loved this fight, she said, her voice plaintive yet simmering with a revived energy. Jake felt a jolt of emotion at the mention of his father, the man whose fight for their family he had long strived to emulate. We can make him proud. Together. A renewed sense of purpose surged within him as they launched into a discussion, exchanging ideas, forming outlines, brainstorming reach-to-action strategies. With every insight, the air crackled with possibility. Yet somewhere in his core, an unsettling shadow lurked. Addressing the mogul directly was an inevitability, but how would he handle the confrontation? What if their ruthlessness clashed with the heart he was now nurturing? As dusk transformed the sky into shades of cobalt, Jake acknowledged the dawning reality that intentions and ideals rarely match the fierce grittiness of survival. And as he faced both women, the pillars of his past, he understood that he stood on the cusp of more than just familial betrayal, but a rebirth of his very essence. The time had come to face the man whose greed had threatened their home. The stakes were high, much higher than personal ambition. Whatever awaited him in that showdown would demand the best and perhaps the worst of him. But as he charted their trajectory forward, one question seeped through the crowded space in his mind. Could he emerge from this triumphantly, or would he lose what little remained of his genuine self among the wreckage of a battle fought for love? Jake rubbed his temples as he gathered the papers strewn across the desk. Each document felt like a thread binding his past and present. His ambition, once molded by the fierce competition of the business world, now wrapped around the struggling roots of his family. The stakes were shifting. He wasn't just fighting for property anymore, but for a legacy, a sense of belonging. Let's start with what we know, he proposed, glancing at Maria, her brows knitted in concentration. What are the usual tactics these developers use? Maria contemplated the question, her eyes thoughtful. They rely on misinformation, undercutting values, and framing communities like ours as outdated, desperate. Jake nodded, his mind racing. Exactly. We need to build a narrative before they do. One that showcases our community's history and highlights the value of this land, the memories and the families it supports. His mother, still standing with her arms crossed, looked at him with a cautious gaze. And what if they counter our arguments with money? They'll drown us in their resources. That's where we'll need to be clever, Jake replied, pacing the small kitchen, feeling the walls closing in and inspiring him to find space to breathe, space to think. We can leverage social media, record testimonials from long-time residents, even organize town meetings to rally support. We have more power than they realize. A small flicker of doubt crossed his mother's face, but her lips pressed together, revealing a reluctant acceptance of the idea. All right, I'll help, she said finally, the softness of agreement easing some of the tension. Jake felt invigorated. Though he had come back with ambition, now courage bloomed within him. Taking initiative was one thing, but inspiring others to do the same was a challenge he was beginning to relish. He jotted down notes on a pad he'd retrieved from the desk, more energized than he had been in years. As they started to lay out their plan, snippets of childhood memories sparked from the faded photographs scattered across the desk. He could feel the weight of his father's absence hanging over the room, pushing him to prove that his journey, one he had once thought solitary, was built on a foundation of family and connection. The following morning, Jake decided to explore the area, the familiar streets now clouded in uncertainty. He needed to scope out potential allies, maybe old friends of his father, folks who shared stories of resilience. Each encounter would be a step back to his roots, a chance to embrace what he had once deemed a hindrance. He walked into a local diner, the bell above the door jingling with the same reminder as old memories crashing back. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the sound of laughter and chatter. It struck him. Here, conversations were not just whispers, but forces of nature that could foster change. Jake settled into a booth ready to reach out and reconnect with the fabric of this community. As he approached the counter, he caught the eye of an elderly man, Harold, who had known his father. After a few moments of cautious exchange, Jake felt the tide turn in their favor. Stories flowed, and with them, hope sparkled in the eyes of the older man when talking about the past. But soon, in the back of his mind, a gnawing unease tugged at his resolve. What if this did not go the way he hoped? He could feel the heavy shadow of doubt pressing down once again. The fear of inadequacy lingered. Would he end up just like his father, battling against powers far greater and more ruthless? The conversations around him blended into a blur as he soul-searched in the thrumming ambience. The ground beneath him felt like shifting sand. It was clear he was on a precipice between past expectations and personal aspirations. Yet the rising energy within him felt oddly exhilarating. Jake was turning toward the abyss, determined to leap. With every moment he realized he must confront the developers head-on, using their tactics against them. He would not only reclaim a home but finance a resurgence, a revival of memories and dreams that had been overshadowed by greed. His heart raced. Torn between the thrill of taking action and the weight of the unknown, he appreciated the path ahead. Jake's next meeting with the mogul loomed, promising confrontation and conflict. Uncertainty gnawed at his gut, but exhilaration pushed him forward. Could he successfully navigate the challenges ahead and redefine his purpose, or would this return to Ohio merely solidify the insecurities he aimed to escape? The moment of truth was on the horizon. Jake stepped out of the diner, a swirl of familiar scents and voices still echoing in his mind. Now, with purpose ignited within him, he glanced at his watch. Time was shrinking, and his meeting with the mogul loomed closer than ever. The clock seemed to mock him, reminding him of how few hours remained to gather his thoughts and tactics. Walking down the street, Jake felt a pang of nostalgia, accompanied by an unsettling sense of urgency. This path, lined with the remnants of his childhood, contrasted his current mission. In a blur of memories, he recalled the stories shared around family dinner tables, tales of resilience that not only shaped his heritage, but also fueled his impending struggle. The glow of a nearby library caught his eye, and a sudden impulse urged him to step inside. The quiet ambiance felt like an embrace. He wandered through the rows, letting the spines of forgotten books reignite ideas and strategies previously tucked away in the depths of his mind. His fingers glided over titles that had once inspired him, each one igniting sparks of determination. Sitting at a large table, he spread out the papers he had collected, strategizing in solitude amidst the echoing silence. For the first time, the realization sank deep. His fight wasn't solely about the land, but about reclaiming a part of himself. Confidence flowed through him as he outlined the narrative he would present, aligning his childhood experiences with the motivations of those he wished to reach. "Jake!" a voice startled him. He looked up to find Mary, an old school friend he hadn't seen in years, hovering by the entrance. Her familiar smile reminded him of simpler days. The light-hearted connection warmed him in contrast to the weight of his escalating mission. "Mary, great to see you," he greeted, gesturing for her to join him at the table. As they reminisced about the past, Jake's instincts kicked into high gear. He discerned a kindred spirit in her, someone who could offer not just emotional support, but also lend a hand in the battle ahead. "You seem different, Jake. There's something about you now," she noted, her brow furrowing with curiosity. "I guess I finally returned to confront some ghosts," he admitted, choosing his words carefully. "A lot is at stake right now. This town, my family connections, even my own sense of identity." Mary leaned in, her interest piqued. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Jake took a deep breath. "There's a developer who aims to take over the land. They don't care about the history or the people, but I'm ready to stand up and fight." Her expression shifted, concern etched across her face. "Is it safe for you? I mean, it sounds intense." "It is," he replied, the weight of vulnerability mixing with determination. "But I can't walk away without trying. This place means too much." The fervor in his eyes sparked something within her. "Count me in, Jake. You shouldn't have to do this alone." As they began brainstorming ways to gather support, Jake felt the tendrils of isolation slowly peel away. He was building a bridge, connecting his past to his present, through collaborations that felt both right and empowering. The conversation flowed smoothly, ideas exchanged like currency, each one a surge of vitality that pushed away lingering doubts. He found himself explaining tactics, rapidly writing down thoughts as they expanded on strategies for community engagement. This was more than a fight. It was a rallying call, a rediscovery of collaboration. Hours passed, and as the sun began its descent, casting shadows across the pages of notes, Jake's phone buzzed. A notification from the developers sent a chill through him. They were moving quickly, making promises that reshaped the landscape he was fighting for. The battle was set to escalate. He thought about what it meant to confront the raw conflict head-on. He had allies now, but was it enough to withstand the impending storm? A sudden idea struck him. "What if we hold a documentary screening of the Old Town stories to pull people together?" he proposed, the rush of inspiration taking hold. They could showcase both the beauty of the community and the impending threat looming over them. Mary's eyes gleamed with intrigue. "That could work. It might even attract more voices to join our cause." Jake's heart raced, a blend of excitement and fear prompting him to move forward. Would this endeavor be the spark that ignited a larger movement, or merely a drop in the ocean of corporate power? He glanced out the library window toward the horizon, knowing the moment was approaching where he would have to face the mogul. Expectations were no longer merely his. People would be impacted by what he chose to do next. Shadows loomed large, and the stakes had never been higher. The stage was set. Jake took a breath, ready to craft his destiny, but conscious of the potential fallout. Would he reclaim his legacy, or was he on the verge of something far more dangerous? The thrill of uncertainty would guide him toward the truth, one way or another. Jake pushed the thought of the mogul from his mind for now. He had Samuel's development team to consider, their plans spreading out like a dark cloud over the horizon. The timeline the developers proposed felt impossibly close, yet he sensed the urgency crystallizing within him, pushing against the weight of his prior hesitations. He leaned back, trying to visualize the documentary as more than just images and voices. It had to be alive, pulsating with the heartbeat of the history he cherished. With Mary by his side, they reconsidered their approach to storytelling. "We should highlight the community's history," she suggested, her excitement feeding off his determination. "Let's capture the essence, the stories that have been passed down, the struggles that defined us." Her words sparked a surge of clarity. Jake began to map out the segments they could include, inviting the older generation to share their memories and entwining them with interviews of the younger locals, creating a tapestry of shared history. There was power in the interconnections, the stories that linked generations and emphasized the urgency of preserving their roots. He was no longer alone in this endeavor. The momentum began to swell. "Let's interview my grandmother," Jake said suddenly, an idea erupting within him. Her stories about growing up here, the love this town embodied. It could resonate with everyone. Mary nodded fervently. "And if we showcase that emotional depth, It might stir people to action to realize what we're risking here. As they forged a plan, the shadows encroached further. Jake could feel the tension in his stomach knotting tighter with every decision they made. Was it altruism driving him, or was it something deeper, a desperation to reclaim lost parts of himself? The pang of nostalgia began to unravel into a complex mix of desire and fear, a dance between honoring his past and confronting his future. They set an ambitious timeline to gather interviews, and for the first time in what felt like ages, he felt a team spirit settle around him, a shared mission that made the daunting task feel tangible. But in the back of his mind, the specter of confrontation loomed. He would need to face Samuel soon, and this strengthened resolve would mean nothing if he didn't prove himself capable in discussions that were sure to shake the very foundation of his fight. As days melted into nights, they collected interviews, capturing laughter, sorrow, and memories in the same breath. Their focus sharpened amid the adrenaline of unraveling a story that stirred more than just concern. It ignited a fierce passion within. But now doubts crept in whenever he was alone. Would the documentary be enough to sway public opinion against the developer? The night before the screening, unease churned within him, his thoughts fracturing into the myriad of what-ifs. Anxiety turned to sleepless restlessness as he reflected on the visuals they had created. Was this compilation merely wishful thinking, or wielded enough weight to push back against the encroaching threat? As he took a midnight stroll to clear his mind, the chill of the night air tugged at his consciousness. A loud shout broke through the silence. It was close. Instinctively, he moved towards the sound, heart pounding as if sensing something far more sinister than he anticipated. Hidden in the shadows of alleyways, he caught sight of a confrontation. 3 men leaning aggressively over someone he couldn't fully see. The sight ignited every protective instinct within him. Should he intervene? Or was playing it safe the smarter choice? He stood frozen for a beat, turmoil cascading through him like icy water. Was this the moment he'd feared, where he would have to confront his deepest values? A startling realization hit him. He wasn't just battling for the land now. He was fighting for the very soul of this community, for a future he believed in. But did he have the courage to step in? The decision hung in the balance. The clock had struck midnight, but whether it signified the dawn of a new chapter or the closing of an unyielding night depended on his next move. Would he take a stand, not just against the developer, but against everything that threatened his past, present, and future? Breath held tight, he stepped forward, compelled by urgency, ready to face a challenge that could redefine him again. Jake's heart raced, and with each step he took toward the scene, uncertainty clouded his thoughts. What if he made things worse? Yet, as he neared, he glimpsed the person caught in the standoff. A young man, barely out of his teens, fear radiating from his clenched fists and wide eyes. "Hey!" Jake shouted, voice more commanding than he felt. The trio turned, annoyed glares flickering momentarily toward him. As he approached, the tension in the air thickened, the crackling energy demanding his focus. "What's going on here?" he demanded, trying to channel an authority he didn't fully own. The aggressors laughed dismissively, their confidence buoyed by their numbers. Jake's knees quaked slightly under their scrutiny. He could either retreat or hold his ground. That choice crystallized his understanding of himself. He had to act, not just for the boy, but for his own emerging sense of self. "Nothing to do with you, buddy. Just clearing out some trash," one of them sneered, stepping closer, puffing out his chest. The implication was clear. They believed he wouldn't dare stand in their way. But the boy was counting on him. Jake's senses honed in on the need for a strategy. He glanced around, searching for a way to diffuse the situation. "Let's talk this out," he proposed, his voice low and steady, embodying a calm he didn't feel. "You don't need to hurt anyone." He could see doubt creeping into the attacker's eyes, but it wasn't enough to deter them. "You're going to regret this," another warned, fist clenched tight. That was the moment Jake felt the world tilt. It brought him back to much earlier in his life, a time when he chose to ignore a wrong because it was easier, making peace with compromise instead of standing firm for what mattered. "Actually, no," Jake said, voice gaining strength. He nodded toward the boy behind the mob. "You think hurting him makes you stronger? No, it makes you weaker. You're just scared, I get it. But this isn't how you prove anything." For a flicker of an instant, uncertainty hung in the air. The words tethered reality to a truth Jake had uncovered in himself. Strength lay not in violence, but in the conviction to protect, to stand up, even when faced with intimidation. He felt the boy's gaze shift from the group to him, and another shift occurred, a flicker of hope. This unplanned relationship forged between them, this moment of protecting and caring, was changing something deep within him. He was no longer merely a passive observer navigating through nostalgic ideas. He was becoming a proactive force, imbued with an undeniable sense of responsibility. Suddenly, one of the aggressors lunged at Jake, but he intercepted, feeling adrenaline surge. In a brief scuffle, he sidestepped them, pushing the boy behind him, shielded by the unexpected courage he now embraced. The atmosphere crackled as chaos erupted around them, but it felt strangely invigorating, as though adrenaline was fueling Jake's resolve. In those tumultuous seconds, he understood he was no longer just a filmmaker grappling with his past. He was part of a pivotal narrative unfolding in real time. As the confrontation intensifies, Jake's thoughts were no longer solely about the documentary or the development. It was about standing for something that anchored not just his history, but the lives surrounding him. And it dawned on him, he might just have the voice and the resolve to inspire change, to evoke a shift tangible enough to resonate beyond just his film. With adrenaline surging, he sank deeper into the moment, grappling with a newfound purpose. But would it be enough? The punches were flying now, and the world around them blurred into a chaotic swirl, a potent reminder that choices made in hurried moments can carve destinies. As the fracas escalated, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was just the beginning, a preface to confrontations yet to come. Would he be able to hold on to this conviction when faced with Samuel's machinations? The stakes were rising, and so were the challenges. The night wasn't just a test of his courage. It was the crucible forging a new Jacob out of the embers of despair. But as the dust settled, he grasped that his personal and professional development hung in the balance, begging the questions. Was he ready to take on Samuel? And what sacrifices lay ahead to protect everything he held dear? Jake's pulse quickened with each punch that flew through the air. The chaotic swirl of limbs and shouts spun him into a place where instinct overrode reason. The moment he had pushed the boy behind him transformed him from a mere participant to a protector, igniting a fire deep within. But this confrontation teased out a bittersweet reality. Every action carried weight. Even as adrenaline coursed through his veins, he felt the sheer vulnerability that accompanied it. In the midst of the scuffle, he landed a firm jab against an attacker. The satisfying grunt mixed with the ambient noise of the night reflected a glimmer of assertiveness he had been seeking. Yet, as the boy's terrified face burned in his mind, Jake's resolve solidified. Each movement he executed became drenched in the urgency of not just protecting the boy, but in redefining who he was. The layers of inaction from his past peeled away, revealing a higher purpose that seeped through the cracks of his projection as a filmmaker. The fight raged on, a swirl of chaos that matched the tempest roaring within him. Jake ducked another swing and countered with a well-placed kick, but he felt the alertness of his mind giving way to fatigue, a sharp reminder that he was human, prone to exhaustion and faltering resolve. He needed to devise a plan. Instinct alone wouldn't sustain the momentum. For the first time in what felt like forever, he thought about what it meant to truly stand up for someone. This wasn't about creating a documentary. It was about forging relationships in the real world, where stakes were not scrambled narratives, but lives. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, visualizing the film he aimed to make, the truths he wished to tell, infusing them with the reality at hand. How could a mere camera capture this raw moment of humanity, this intersection of fear and bravery? The boy, a mere shadow behind his shield, felt nearly solid against Jake's back. He realized the lad's life was now intricately woven with his own. Protecting him meant standing his ground, and protecting him opened pathways to a realization that maybe the boy wasn't just a figure in the background. He was, in his own way, motivating Jake to evolve. When he managed a clean elbow strike to an aggressor's chest, driving him back, the moment hung heavy in the air, a decisive turn of the tide. The others paused, exchanging glances that registered uncertainty. Jake hadn't anticipated this shift. Boldness fueled by purpose descended over him like armor, and he seized the moment. "Enough," he bellowed, voice cutting through the din of chaos. He straightened his posture and stepped forward, raising his fists, an unintentional expression of dominance. But beneath that bravado, self-doubt clung to him like a shadow. What if they didn't back down? What if he had to reconsider his convictions in face of consequences? "You want to fight someone?" he challenged, teeth clenched. "I've got a camera, a story to tell you, but you don't knock down a narrative by hurting innocent people." Jake's heart raced, not just from exertion, but from the ripple of fear coursing through the air. He was saying out loud what he had been too frightened to truly embody, a refusal to let his past define him. In that moment, clarity coursed through him, along with adrenaline. He understood that standing in front of the group was no longer just about confronting violence. It was about challenging the role he had played in the past, the unwillingness to disrupt misguided narratives with truth. But even amidst his rising confidence, as one aggressor charged at him, the stakes were higher than he could have imagined. He could not allow a single miscalculation to lead to disaster, not for him, but for the boy who relied on him. The sudden thought shattered his emerging clarity, the realization that while he could defend and protect, the fight was not just with his fists, but with the ongoing battle over his own narrative. In this chaotic epiphany, he suddenly recognized that facing Samuel would be an entirely different fight, one steeped in a more insidious struggle of will and intent. And just as that crushing thought sank in, the aggressor locked his gaze onto Jake, a predatory gleam igniting in his eyes. Would this chance to redefine himself evaporate before he could even grasp it fully? Would the personal revolution he had ignited meet its end at the cusp of this new confrontation? The future felt like a tightrope, teetering precariously as the fight continued to unfold. Just when Jake felt the urgency to act gripping his core, the boy's voice pierced the chaos. "Jake, look out!" Would he be able to balance the newfound courage against impending danger? Or would he falter, surrendering his chance at growth to the very forces he sought to confront? Jake barely processed the warning before instinct propelled him into a sidestep, barely evading the blow that could have sent him crashing to the ground. The adrenaline caused time to stretch, allowing him a fleeting awareness of every detail, the smell of sweat and fear mingling in the air, the weight of his own breathing, the frantic look in the boy's eyes as he instinctively shrank back. A momentary shift initiated within him. Reaction replaced reflection, and he felt the fire of determination refuel his resolve. No more was he just a passive observer, caught in the narrative of life. He had become an active agent, the writer of his own story. "Back up!" Jake shouted, feigning bravery as he eyed his attacker. Clenching his fists, he prepared to confront the essence of his fear. Each thunderous pulse in his ears reminded him that the confrontation was less about physical strength and more about psychological dominance. With a deep breath, he steeled himself against the storm brewing inside. The aggressor circled him, a predator sizing up its prey. With each passing moment, Jake scrutinized him, eyes narrowing as he sought a weakness. It occurred to him that for too long he had let life play out as a screenplay he had little control over, letting others dictate the terms of engagement. Now, however, he couldn't afford to retreat into old narratives. As Jake calculated his next move, he felt a flicker of unexpected clarity. This moment, this fight, the very essence of his current reality, all of it aligned with the deeper resolution to reclaim his identity. He envisioned the stories he wanted to tell, the characters, emotions, and truths woven intricately. They no longer felt distant or abstract. They converged in front of him, a boy expecting protection in a chaotic space. "Why don't we talk this out instead of swinging fists?" he proposed, searching for a diplomatic route while assessing the positioning of the boy behind him. The question hung in the air, but Jake recognized it was as much for the aggressor's benefit as for himself, a subtle reflection of the negotiation taking place in his own mind. Suddenly the aggressor's laughter punctuated the tension, a discordant note that grated against the urgency of Jake's plea. Talk? What's that worth? You've got guts standing up for someone else, but you're still just a coward with a camera. Coward. The word echoed mercilessly through the turmoil of his thoughts, but it ignited the spark of anger buried deep inside. Questions swirled in Jake's mind. What defined courage if not the willingness to confront fear head-on? The past moments of avoidance haunted him, stinging like a fresh bruise. It felt as though his entire life had been built around evasion and uncertainty, where he retreated behind the lens and let the world play out beyond his reach. Point taken, he muttered, taking a step closer, but this time I'm not backing down. Jake's eyes narrowed, not just on the adversary but on himself. The confrontation he faced wasn't solely external, it was the culmination of his internal battles, the decision to rise above the layers of insecurity and stand firm against doubt. Fueled by this newfound clarity, he pivoted his approach. He would transcend the moment, not only for himself, but for the boy, an embodiment of hope and innocence in peril. As he pressed forward, his movements transitioned from mere self-defense to a calculated strategy. The confrontation morphed into something deeper, where each action became a declaration of who he was choosing to become. Just as he prepared for the next strike, a flicker of movement caught his eye. The aggressor's cohort surged forward, emboldened by their numbers. "Jake!" The boy's voice broke through the haze of impending chaos, urgency seeping into every syllable. He had to act. No more hesitating, no more doubts. The fight wasn't just for self-preservation, it was about rewriting his narrative and claiming his truth. In that instant, Jake realized he was on the verge of a deeper revelation, a movement toward authenticity that extended beyond physical confrontation. Would this newfound strength hold against the tide of fear, or would the shroud of his past threaten to drown his emerging identity? He had to find out. As the shadows closed in around him, Jake clenched his fists. The moment was electric with uncertainty, a gateway into a defining choice. Would he succumb, or would he rise as the man he had longed to be? The surge of adrenaline coursed through Jake as he faced the looming threat, the urgency of the boy's call grounding him in the present moment. The hostile group ahead was no longer faceless shadows. They represented every fear he was trying to conquer. There was no time to question his strategy further. Action demanded full commitment. Gripping his fists tightly, he took a bold step toward the aggressive circle, recalling the stigma of being a coward that now ignited a fierce defiance in him. Evasion was no longer an option. This was the chance to redefine what it meant to protect, not just the boy behind him, but also the wreckage of his own self-doubt. Jake's mind raced to form a tactical approach. He resonated with the idea that confrontation didn't have to descend into chaos. Perhaps he could still negotiate through assertiveness. "You want a fight?" he called out, voice steady. "Then let's make it fair, just one of you at a time." The words hung in the air, surprising even himself. Yet he hoped that offering a semblance of control would shift the dynamics even slightly in his favor. The aggressors hesitated, eyeing each other as the challenging spirit of Jake's proposal settled into their consciousness, showing the first cracks of conflict within their group. It was a minor victory, yet it didn't quench the looming storm of apprehension within him. He had proposed a boundary, a stake in this game where he'd felt powerless. Then came a flash of insight. If he could control the environment, perhaps he could control the outcome. Jake turned his gaze to the boy behind him, a silent appeal for courage in the face of danger. His expression softened, recognizing the weight of expectation he had placed on himself. The realization set in that protecting the boy meant embracing vulnerability on his part. "Stay close," he murmured, inviting the boy to trust him. A chorus of mocking jeers broke the tension, shattering the moment. One of the aggressors, brimming with bravado, stepped forward. "I'll take you on first," he growled, hurling an insult that sliced through Jake's newfound strategy. The words felt personal. They tied into his fear, the lingering taunt of inadequacy that echoed within. But it was the second voice that stirred a deeper resolve in Jake, the voice of his past, the long-forgotten spark ignited by a childhood love of storytelling and fighting for truth. What had he sought to document behind the camera? Stories drenched in authenticity. In that realization, he could feel the fog of fear lifting like a veil, revealing the strength hidden beneath. As the aggressor lunged, Jake shifted, using calculated footwork to evade while honing in on intent. His own body responded with confidence, each move nearly instinctual. The confrontation became a dance, the rhythm echoing with resilience and adaptability, celebrating not just his defense, but the reclamation of who he believed he could be. He landed a decisive hit that pushed the assailant back. With this display of unexpected prowess, Jake could feel a shift. The bewildered expressions from the other aggressors suggested that they weren't dealing with the meek man they had anticipated. There was an unmistakable buzz, a potent and raw declaration of his newfound identity. However, amidst the tumultuous engagement, he noticed the boy's eyes, wide with admiration, but also imbued with concern. The boy's very safety hinged upon his next decision. This fight, he understood, was not purely physical, but emblematic of his growth and transformative journey toward authenticity. Fight, or flight, he thought, reflecting on which part of himself he wanted to prevail. The blood coursing through his veins, blaring the battle cry for authenticity, insisting that he choose fight, not just for himself, but for every dream he dared to harbor. Just as a sense of triumph surged through him, the swarm of aggressors became emboldened. They advanced again. The weight of their numbers threatened to overwhelm him. The conclusion to this fight loomed closer than ever, but would victory mean risking it all? In the heightening chaos, Jake felt an irresistible urge to unleash the latent potential he had discovered within himself, one that could rewrite the very narrative he had long evaded. With uncertainty still crawling in the background, he steadied himself for the next challenge, knowing the results of this battle would ripple outward, defining not just tonight, but the man he was destined to become. Would he be prepared to face the ultimatum awaiting him, or would the lingering shadows of self-doubt reel him back? Only time would unveil the answer. In the aftermath of the chaos, Jake found himself standing amid the debris of a battle fought more than just for physical territory. The night had revealed the intensity of his transformation. No longer was he the man intimidated by the shadows of his past. Rather, he emerged as a protector, a guardian not only of his family's legacy, but of a burgeoning sense of self-worth that resonated deep within him. As the aggressors fled, Jake breathed heavily, still processing the adrenaline coursing through him. He shifted his gaze to the young boy who had witnessed the entire ordeal, now standing in awe. It was in that moment he recognized the cycle of influence, how bravery could breed bravery. "You all right?" he asked, his voice steady yet tinged with remnants of adrenaline. "Yeah," the boy breathed, eyes wide. "That was amazing. You stood up for me." A wave of pride washed over Jake. He had not only defended someone else, but had reclaimed parts of himself in the act. This exchange marked a pivot point. He wasn't merely a product of his environment, but a catalyst for change, a role he had previously shied away from while pursuing dreams cushioned in comfort. "Let's get you home," Jake said, his voice now calm. The boy nodded, and for the first time since arriving, a weight lifted from Jake's shoulders. The confrontation, however tumultuous, had ignited a clarity that transcended the physical skirmish. It was a realization that courage could flourish in even the direst moments. With the undercurrent of community reverberating through him, Jake found himself invigorated. He had forged connections and affirmations in that fleeting instance. It was evident that the environment of risk was transcending realms for him, instead morphing into a vehicle through which he could mold narratives, influence perspectives, and plant the seeds for future resilience. Within days, the local diner buzzed with conversations around the young boy's encounter with Jake. The documentary had also begun to take form, invoking interest from the town's residents eager to ensure their stories were told. Community Roots, a fight for legacy, became a rallying cry. The fearless act had catalyzed a movement, one Jake would lead, inviting voices from all corners of the town to unite, share their narratives, and stand firm against the advancing threats of dispassionate development. The day of the documentary screening dawned, filling Jake with an exhilaration he had rarely known. He stood before an audience of neighbors and friends, the walls forged from years of shared stories encompassing the space. As the narratives unfolded, a tapestry rich with history and heart knit its audience together into an unbreakable community bond. With each story shared, Jake felt himself reclaiming deeper layers of joy intermingled with pride. It was as if the essence of each person's narrative helped redefine the contours of his own. No longer did he exist solely as a successful entrepreneur swathed in luxury, but rather as a custodian of shared histories. This shift unfolded like petals, revealing a flower long amid thorns. Jake was finally embracing vulnerability and strength in tandem. When the credits rolled, the applause resonated deeply, a thunderous acknowledgement of shared determination. His mother's tear-filled eyes met his across the crowded room, filled with pride and gratitude. Confrontation had bred connection, and Jake had become more than an architect of success. He had become a bridge spanning generations, a voice advocating for their collective heartbeat. The warmth of appreciation rippled through the crowd as they began discussing plans to confront the developers. They talked about a unified front, possibly igniting initiatives that would transform not just the physical landscape, but also their societal paradigm. In that moment, Jake understood that his fight no longer revolved solely around personal achievement, but an unwavering essence of genuine community development. The weight shifted. He stood as a force for collective empowerment. Reflecting on the days that unfolded since his return, Jake acknowledged his metamorphosis. He had conquered a conflict that challenged his very existence, emerging from the encounter with Samuel not as a conqueror, but as a man who had woven the fabric of his life into the tapestry of his home. The legacy he now cultivated was interlinked with the lives of those he held dear, leading him to an understanding that success was not merely wealth, but fulfillment, cultivated through relationships and shared purpose. As Jake gazed out over the faces of his community, he felt solid confidence rising within him. He had demonstrated resilience and authenticity, embodying the narrative of resurgence that echoed far beyond the confines he once accepted. Here he found fulfillment, not in luxury, but in the rich connections that thrived around him. "Let's not just protect this land," Jake told the audience, his voice firm with resolve. "Let's celebrate it, nurture it, and infuse it with our stories. Our legacy is more than brick and mortar. It's the bond we share, and together we will honor it." In that moment of convergence, Jake fully embraced who he had become, confident, competent, and part of a narrative far more profound than he had initially imagined. He had achieved true victory, one that secured not just his roots, but forged a path for the future that echoed with strength and unity. So if you appreciate witnessing real transformation and deep human connections, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for these moving tales. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach even more hearts. Don't wait even one more second to share this journey with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Comment your thoughts and reactions. Let's keep the conversation alive about personal and community resilience.